1999, a very noted publication came out called "To Err is Human." Institute of Medicine, one of the conclusions with that was we're killing over 100,000 people a year from medical mistakes, preventable medical mistakes at healthcare providers in the US, hurting about 5 times more than that. About 20 years later, the American Medical Association, the Journal for Patient Quality, came out with a follow-up. How are we doing 20 years later? We're not doing any better. We're likely doing worse, or those estimates were low. Estimated that over 400,000 people are being killed. That's more than all the armed conflicts in the history of our company combined every year from preventable medical mistakes, and more than 10 times that being hurt. The most common in surgery medical mistake, year in and year out, as measured by the FDA reporting database and Joint Commission, about 4,000 times a year and about 11 times a day. One of those guys retained a sponge that was left inside of a patient. So a surgical sponge made of cotton, small case you might use 10, 15, large case around up to 200. You soak them with blood. Your circulating nurse and your scrub nurse are tasked with counting these by hand. And what do you know? To err is human. They're human. Mistakes get made. What happens when you leave a sponge inside somebody? First of all, bad for the patient. Patient's already been opened up with some sort of issue. Best case scenario, you catch it quick, you treat a mild infection. Worst case scenario, you know what usually happens? They go back to the operative report. What does the operative report say? By definition, that team thinks the count is correct, so they don't check for a retained sponge usually right away. Ultimately, that's caught on x-ray, and hopefully it hasn't manifested itself into something worse. Around a de facto 100% temporary permanent, and a surprisingly high, almost up to 13% mortality rate from a piece of cotton being left in the patient. For the hospitals, you're going to get sued. These will settle out of court, depending on the state, somewhere around right under $470,000. You don't get reimbursed for the original procedure. You don't get reimbursed to fix it. So a little over $500,000 every time one of these things gets left behind. Things that aren't as measurable: time, fines, reimbursable care, and the reputation. So right now, if you or one of your loved ones is going on for surgery, you're going to have people count these by hand. In 2024, a company called SurgiCount Medical launched a product that used unique identifiers on sponge in the form of a barcode. It would count them before and count them after using a unique identifier on each sponge. And what do you know? A nurse with a barcode scanner counting uniquely identified sponges gets a more accurate count. I know because I started that company. We later went public through a SPAC in 2008. Been a while. And we ultimately exited that business to Stryker. Solid first generation technology. Safe to say that technology was stale the day we invented that product, but it was a good step in the right direction. That's been on the market for about 20 years. But you've got a couple other first generation technologies. Some went out of business, some were acquired. Safe to say, after being on the market for almost 20 years, you got about 10% penetration of my old product. Medtronic has another product. Solid first generation product, but after 20 years, you've got almost 80% of the hospitals in the US who are still counting by hand, right? And so, these are the people we spoke to. No, not really. What do people tell you about sort of first generation technologies? They're cumbersome. You can imagine scanning a barcode. If you've been to a grocery store and done self-checkout, harder to scan some stuff than others. Imagine doing that for a folded, twisted up sponge. It slows clinical workflow. Some will say my old product and a couple others just lack the desired functionality. It might give you a good count, but it doesn't help you find something when it's missing. And not so much my old product, but a couple other on the market sometimes fail. They don't work when they're supposed to, and that's a problem. And cost, right? So I never thought after selling my business that I'd be thinking about retained surgical sponges ever again in my lifetime, but came across a newer form of RFID, ended up licensing a number of patent families, and together with people that I had worked with at my old company, competed against at other companies, people from my distribution partner at Cardinal Health. We raised some money, or actually just put in our own, and got together to pioneer what we thought would be a next generation product, more reliable, easier to use, costs less, and does more, right? So when we started doing sort of, hey, take a look under the hood, we've got something new, talking to hospitals, if you've got something better, faster, cheaper, does more, you're gonna get that meeting, and we have. So we combined not only our own thoughts, but we went out and talked to customers, just like we did from day one. What do you want? Why aren't you using something? What do you like about this product? What do you not like about it? And we created Tally. So it's a proprietary RFID-based solution, simplifies and speeds that count dramatically, helps you find sponges when you're missing it, and does it at a lower cost. So there's what a surgical sponge is with one of our barcode labels on the outside. It's soft, it's pliable, you can twist it, it's fast. A relatively, not quite, but a generally off-the-shelf mobile device with an integrated RFID reader and a mobile app that does your counting and finding for you. We have to slow down the speed in order for the nurse to have a more tangible experience, but it's very quick. It helps find sponges when you're missing it, and it's very affordable. We adapted RFID in a new proprietary way, but we intentionally tried to do it first with a technology or a form of that technology that was very inexpensive. Sponges are used ubiquitously throughout surgery in the US, around 5,500 acute care facilities. This doesn't include ambulatory surgical centers, which, as some of you may know, is actually getting a surprising amount of shift in operative workload. Around 36 million, I'll say, relevant annual procedures. These are any procedure where the person's being opened up, something's going in them like a sponge that has an X-ray detectable element in it and supposed to come back out. Around the average number of sponges of different types used per case is around 25. So you've got about 900 million sponges used. Our market opportunity is a little under $500 million here in the US and around 3 times that worldwide. Clinicians always look that happy, don't they? Anyway, so like I said, we've previewed this. We think we know the space well, but we're not presumptive enough to think that we know exactly what customers want. So we involved many of our customers in the development process. We took it to people using my old product to see if they liked it. We took it to people who were using a competitive product to see if they would switch into ours. And we took it to people who weren't using anything, who were waiting for something better. That's led to a growing pipeline of opportunity for us. It's the board of directors here. It's people who've been there, done that already in the space, and accomplished people who've driven exits in this space before. Cleared regulatory path. We actually got our FDA approval during the height of the pandemic, which was a surprise to us, but cleared regulatory path. We went out and started demoing the device for folks, and I think we were over target with 90% of it, but we definitely got feedback on some things that we wanted to tighten up and add to the solution. We're just completing those product improvements now. Having some discussions with partners to help us accelerate our growth trajectory and supply chain, and got a lot of people excited to give it a shot. We're preparing for our US launch. And that's a little bit about Tally Surgical. Expect us to come back, soft launch here this year, full commercial launch later this year, likely announce some strategic partnerships, launch in the US, look for us to innovate our product, leverage our footprint in the OR to do more than just sponge counting with that one device, and ultimately launch outside the US as well. That is it. Thank you.